Alrighty. It's time. It's
All right.
official.
It's
200th
time.
episode. Here we go.
We're in it.
All right, take two. Hello, I always feel like I have to do more takes when it's you as the guest than when it's somebody else. I can just roll into it. There's more pressure on here. Okay. Take three. Hello, innovators. I'm Todd Weyandt, and welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast presented by Applied Software Great Tech Group. You're invited to join our conversation to model the future of construction, innovation, and the digital transformation adventure of this great industry. We're celebrating a very special milestone today on Bridging the Gap. It is our 200th episode. It's crazy. To help me celebrate, I am joined once more by my partner in crime, our editor and producer, Eric Daniel. Welcome back to this side of the mic, Eric.
Thank you, Todd. It's great to be back on this side of the mic. Love being on the show and celebrating the milestones.
It's crazy. It doesn't seem like we should already be at our 200th episode. It seems like a lot of episodes in the books, but here we are.
That's crazy. Yeah, it's hard to believe. I was looking back at the last one of the recaps of the last episode, and it's been about a year. I was in this room. I was in this house. I've had this house for about a year. So the logo of the Bridging the Gap poster looked a little different.
Yeah, it's gotten a facelift since then. I like it. Any kind of standout moments from the last 100 since we did a big recap episode on episode 100?
Oh, the last 100. Wow. It's such a great honor to make it to 100 episodes as a show. Just the amount of work and research and just amazing conversations that goes into getting 100 episodes is a feat. And to be at 200, it just feels even more like the train just keeps rolling. I love it. Lots of stands out. I feel like everything is so different than it used to be. I feel like the major trends and topics that were happening then are still there, but there's so many new things and new people and new ideas on the scene that it's almost a different industry in a way.
Yeah, for sure. There's been so much change. It's funny. I still kind of think of the show as relatively new, and that we're still in our infancy. Like there's so many different areas that we haven't addressed and explored. And then you look back and it's like 200 episodes. We've been going at this for 4 years almost. It's just kind of mind blowing. So I love stats. I pulled a couple stats.
Oh yes,
just the growth of the show, and it's mind blowing and truly humbling of just the somehow people are listening and more people are listening to us and spreading the word. I don't know why, but I'm grateful for people to keep coming in. So 2022, the audience grew by a third over the 2021 audience. And so far this calendar year, just 4.5 months in, as of recording this, 2023 has already matched the audience size from 2021.
Wow.
So it's crazy. We're like 70% growth over 2022 numbers, which is truly it's mind blowing. I keep saying that, but I'm kind of at a loss for words around it. It's that growth is just unbelievable.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. You warned me that you were going to pull some mind blowing stats.
Yeah. I have a couple more for you.
Okay.
So in the last 6 months, I was looking at the different countries that people are listening into. There was 91 countries represented in our listenership, which is crazy. It's just truly become an international show with, I mean, that's
Yeah.
almost half the countries of the world are tuning in. So there's a lot of pressure to get it right and
Yeah.
to, make sure that we're delivering content that is relevant to a very diverse, very sprawling industry, because construction looks totally different in
Yeah.
different parts of the world. So I take that as a huge responsibility.
Yeah. I get what you mean about feeling like the show can be in its infancy, because we'll get a notification that says your show is trending in this country. I'm not sure I had heard of the country before. And it was like, it's like the big topic in the technology sector. It's like there is still so much to learn, and to so many people to talk to, and so many more conversations to have.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And even with the growth of the show, I mean, we're talking to a very niche, small segment of the overarching construction industry, and that's where I say there's so many different opportunities to explore different facets of construction, and what does that look like, and not just from the technology vantage point, but from the human side of things, from the business side of things. That we've touched that, we've covered that, but we've just kind of scratched the surface in 200 episodes. So I'm looking forward to really diving in there more. But kind of first question to you, I mentioned feeling the kind of the weight and the responsibility of it, and I mean that, I don't mean that as just platitudes. That's I really do feel that responsibility of it. Of where do you see, or how do you feel, kind of that responsibility of producing really good quality content that is relatable for the industry, and helps kind of come alongside of them and support them?
Yeah. Big question. Yeah, I think a lot of it is, uh, you got to practice what you preach. A lot of these trends, I think, is where having these conversations, I think the responsibility is to listen more than talk. I think it really, I think everybody would know what the important points are when they're thinking about the industry, but to kind of knit them together and share them in a way that other people are like, hey, I would love to come talk about like this important thing that's semi related, or that I actually haven't heard you guys talk about this before. I'd love to come on the show and talk about it. So I think that there's some responsibility in listening, but also, um, with you ask the if you have all construction power question at the end of each episode. I think there's a responsibility in uh, keeping the ball moving forwards. Like when some of the questions are addressed, or people are finding solutions to big problems. I think there's a little bit of a responsibility to keep it moving forwards, to keep challenging people, not to kind of rest on their laurels in some things.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I love that you said listen more than you talk, and I feel like in my vantage point of being able to host the show, I mean that's my my sole role here, is to listen and just kind of poke in, of kind of going down rabbit trails, and just asking questions, and then I get the pleasure of just sitting back and listening, and learning from people all over the industry. I've gotten such a crash course over the 4 years of what construction is, and the various kind of obstacles and hurdles that are in the way, but also the opportunities and the rewards that are happening in construction as well too, by just coming in with, I'm just here to listen to whatever you're going to say, and to kind of put myself in the person's vantage point, whether I have that same background or experience doesn't matter, because I'm just kind of interested in their story, and what they have to say. So I think there's a huge lesson, not just in construction, but across the board,
Yeah.
of slowing down and just listening.
Yeah, totally agree.
So is there kind of a key defining thing that you've learned over the 200 episodes so far?
It's going to sound broad, but just how key communication is.
Oh, you stole my answer.
Oh,
yeah. All right, go for it.
There's a lot of lip service to it, but it's the definition expands so much more than just talking to somebody and making sure that you're heard. We're talking about communication between pieces of software. We're talking about communication, among teams and managers, employees. The definition is so much broader than just saying you need to talk to people. And I think that applies to probably most industries, but this one in particular, I think there are a lot of hurdles in the way of, we've always done it this way to, I'm skeptical of technology. So there's so many, that definition, I think is so much broader than people realize, that until that boundary is pushed, or, like on a recent episode, somebody was talking about how everybody was skeptical about something until it worked. And then the phones were going off the hook. They were just ringing off the hook the next day. I think that is the potential of what happens when communication works. And so I think that is one of the biggest points that I've seen come up over the past 200 episodes.
More than agree. Obviously, you stole my answer, but I'm always amazed at, no matter what the topic of the conversation is, inevitably it always comes back. The guests will bring it back to communication. It's not that I'm leading the conversation. At least I don't think I'm leading the conversation into that direction. It comes up very organically, almost every single episode, of the need for good communication skills, and then the ability to tell a compelling and authentic story alongside of that. We talk a lot about how when you're rolling out new technology, don't just say the same key points and the key benefits to every single persona and stakeholder that you come across, because it's not the same. That what's going to be good for the owner is not what's going to be good for the person in the field, and vice versa. You got to tweak and tailor that messaging around.
Yep, totally agree.
Well, I know you have some questions to kind of flip the table on and take on some hosting roles here.
All right,
go for it.
Okay, on the line of on the topic of communication, the past, maybe at like the 150th episode, we were kind of wrapping up a big series about voices from the field. Now that we have heard from a lot more people in the field, kind of what's your key takeaway from from that topic, and just how like communication from the field will impact the rest of the industry?
It's essential. Communication from the field is essential for sure. We don't fix the hurdles and the problems, frankly, that exist between the field communicating back to the office. Good luck. You're not going to fix the overarching industry-wide problems in construction. More specifically, that was one of my favorite series. I love exploring and hearing the people that are actually doing the work, that way more competent and skilled than I will ever claim to be, and hearing their vantage point and perspective on it. And one of the things that maybe surprised me, I don't know if that might be too strong, but I was pleasantly surprised. I'll go with that. With during that series is just the openness and the eagerness of the people in the field to embrace technology and to bring in new technology. You know, the rap is that they don't want it, that they're not as eager to change as the people in the office and the people that are really driving the innovation. But that wasn't true in at least the people that we were talking to. They were super excited about it. Sometimes they need to be convinced a little bit of, is this the right tool and the right software for what they're actually, where their pain point is. And that's a different topic. You know, going back to good communication skills, that's an entirely different conversation. If you're trying to figure out what is this the right one versus I don't like technology across the board. And I think a lot of times people that are in the technology world all the time, they hear any kind of pushback and they go, oh, they just don't like technology, instead of taking the time to unpack that a bit more and figure out which camp are they in. Are they truly just anti-technology, or are they just skeptical of this specific one for this specific pain point? And have you really addressed why it's beneficial for them in this particular case?
I think the field actually does a lot better than the office at adopting new technology. I think that it's all about proving that it works and not forcing it on someone and showing the benefits. So I think when a new piece of technology is kind of going viral among people in the field and they're seeing how it works and they're testing it out, and they're bringing it to the office, I think it's always more beneficial than just it kind of coming as a push from the top down. I think I think the field just does so much better at that.
Yeah, more than agree. I think it has to be a more organic process than you can't totally mandate somebody to adopt and implement a certain piece of technology without their buy-in. You can do it, but it's not really going to be effective because they're just going to do the bare minimum, and that's it. You're not going to get the full benefit out of it. It goes back to what we talk about a lot of, and you know, firsthand, I'm a big believer in this of sit down and have the white space to plan out what you're thinking before you actually just willy-nilly dive in and think that implementing a new piece of technology is going to solve all the issues and problems that you have, because it's not. It's probably going to make things worse unless you take the time to figure out where are the weaknesses going to come into play. What are you trying to get? What's the end goal? Where's your North Star that you're going to try to reach in this new technology? And then what's your game plan to get there? That's going to change as you start to practically roll it out, but you have to have something on paper for you to have any chance of success. If you don't, you're just throwing darts totally blindfolded, and good luck trying to hit the target.
So if we zoom out a little bit and we look at not just one piece of new technology, but we look at all of them in the ecosystem of an organization. So if we look at the interoperability side of things, how has that definition kind of changed and evolved over the past year? And what kind of impact do you think it's had?
I'm going to go broader than a year. Thinking back on the last 4 years, when we started Bridging the Gap, interoperability was a word that very few people even knew how to say. And it was much more kind of theoretical. We were talking, it was like the early days, which seems crazy that it was just 4 years ago, but it was kind of the early days of digital transformation and really starting to evangelize that message of what does that mean and what does that look like. That's not what the conversation is today, 4 years later, it's how do you ramp that up? How do you accelerate that? Interoperability has become not just a theoretical, like this would be really nice to have. It's actually starting to happen. And I think that's the huge difference of the 4 years is when we started, interoperability was that theoretical thing. Now it's starting. There's a long road of where we still need to get to, but there's been so much progress that has been made in that, and even the big players in the space have come around and are open to interoperability of that co-opetition mindset of we have to be able to connect and we have to be able to really sync all this data, or at least make it easy for somebody to come in and try to sync the data around, because that's where you're going to reach critical mass.
Yeah, I think it's been a little bit of a labor of love, because with so many new tools coming on the scene, I feel like a lot of people are just kind of learning the hard way, once everything has just kind of been adopted. But it's like, now data is kind of the most important thing that's starting to build up and happen in the industry. And these tools don't really know how to talk to each other yet. They each do their amazing thing, but the amount of efficiency that could be gained from making them talk to one another it's just miles beyond one single tool.
Yeah. And to get on a mini soapbox, since you brought up data and collecting data, that's important. It's more important to know what you're going to do with that data, why you're collecting that data, and how you're going to interpret that data. Most people are just compiling these huge data lakes without having any real concrete plan of what they need to do. They just know that they need to collect it for something, maybe, possibly, potentially someday in the future, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, what's that? There's no strategy or there's no plan in that. It's very ambiguous. We have to clearly define and answer, even if it's conceptually answer, why are you doing this? What do you need it for? What are you trying to get and accomplish out of it? If not, you're just going to be lost in a vast ocean of data, and good luck trying to find anything in that.
Whose responsibility is it to figure out what to do with that data lake?
Oh, I mean, I think it's everybody's. It seems like a cop out, but everybody has a piece of it because everybody has a piece of the data. So that's where the challenge really comes into place, is that you have to get all the stakeholders in construction on board, and I think you probably start on a project basis of like, okay, for this specific project, how do we think about the data? So everybody should be getting around at the table. It's not happening the way it should, but everybody should be getting around at the table at the beginning, from the owner to the architect to the contractors to all the subs, all that stuff, to map out what the project is going to look like. How are you going to use the data? How are you going to communicate with each other? What kind of platforms are you going to be using? Why are you, like, what's the goal? Obviously, get the building built, but what are you trying to accomplish? And lay out all the kind of standard operating procedures there of how are we going to communicate with each other. Going back to communication again. So you map that out, and then everybody has a portion of that ownership in pie, because people are then invested into the end outcome. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. Nope. I totally agree.
Nice. What is, so we're coming off of a really cool series that I've really enjoyed. It's been one of my favorite series of the show, is the Advancing Prefab.
Yes.
We've had over a dozen Advancing Prefab episodes that have gotten dripped out over a course of several months. I lived it in 2 days, but it's been really fun being able to kind of relived those conversations over the last couple of months as well too. What stand out for you in that advancing prefab series?
It was, I don't remember which conversation it was, but um, someone remarked on how many people outside of modular and prefab were there. How many people outside those industries were there? It was like a huge number. And I think that is something that stood out, is how wide the reach of those topics have gotten. I think there has been a lot of talk about modular and prefab over the past few years, but much like interoperability, I think people are starting to finally hear and understand that it's not just some Lego blocks that look cheap uh, at its core. And I think that's where a lot of the conversations were going, was that, okay, now that people are understanding this, here's the like true potential of prefab. And I think there was a lot of excitement there on seeing that people were getting it and were understanding it.
Yeah, for sure. I left that show and listening to these conversations over the last few months just has left me totally optimistic of the future of the industry and where we're going, the energy behind it, and the momentum has really been picking up, which is super exciting to see. You know, we've talked about the convergence between manufacturing and construction, and what does that mean, and how does construction learn from manufacturing, and vice versa, to get the best out of both worlds. And it's happening. There was so much buzz and energy and momentum, not only just within the people, but hearing the reaction to the conversations as well too has been really cool to see. That it was, you know, sometimes you're at a trade show and you're like, well, I'm just in this trade show bubble, feeling the hype and the energy, but coming out into the real world, so to speak, and the real world of LinkedIn, you know, and digital, of people's responses on the episodes. That's been cool to see that it was not just contained in Phoenix in February for advancing prefab. There's a whole army behind the movement that I think has just exponentially grown for sure as well too.
And I think that one of the things I liked, another takeaway that came from the show, was that the whole narrative was kind of like, okay, great, now that people outside this immediate industry are starting to understand the benefits, here's like a key takeaway. And I think that key takeaway was productization. I think that is totally the thing that has universal appeal. It's like, yes, why are we having to reinvent the wheel on this same, you know, fire stairs the same time, every single time? Why are we reinventing the wheel on XYZ bathroom the same time? And I think that concept of productization has so much of a broader understanding, because everybody knows the things that they have to rebuild every single time. That's like, why are we doing this differently every time?
Right. Yeah. Two things. That's Amy Marks on both of these. I love a good Amy Marks quote.
Of course.
The first is, the digital waste exponentially leads to physical waste. She said that during advancing prefab, and 100% that's of course true. That if you are just totally wasting time, and we're rebuilding the model 6 and 7 times throughout, you know, everybody that touches it has to rebuild the model, that's so much waste in that of course it's logical that it's going to lead to physical waste and a bunch of rework. And then the second thing is the expected experience that Amy's talked about for several months now too, of if we are expecting something in our personal lives that we're going to order something on our phone real quick and be able to track it all the way through, and we know all the different sizes and dimensions and specifications of it, why do we not expect that same thing in construction? Why do we settle for way less in construction than what we do in our personal lives? And so I've been going around trying to megaphone that message of Amy's, because it makes total sense of why settle for less in construction when clearly the technology is capable. It's there. We can track a lot of this stuff and we can do a lot of this stuff because we are doing it. So to the doubters out there of, oh, well, that's not, the technology is not there. That's not true. Of course, the technology is there. We just got to bring it into construction and demand that it happen. And it's going to take a collective voice of, no, this is our expectation. Rise up and meet it. Challenge tech providers to match the expectation.
Totally agree.
So where do you see the next step moving for construction as we start to really industrialize the industry? We have that convergence of manufacturing and construction from all the experts that have come through the virtual doors here on the podcast. Where do you see that next step going?
Right. I think right where we were just talking about. I think it goes down to standardization and productization. I think that is going to start to apply to more than just physical pieces of the project. I think that's going to apply to data and how data is architected. I think that's going to apply to new pieces of technology, how those are implemented. I think there's a better process for how to implement and get buy-in, and also to hook that up to the rest of the interoperable pieces of software. I also think that there's going to be more standards and processes around hiring as well. I think to set people up for to come into those roles. We were just talking to Katie Hall about kind of the AI and hiring side, and she was saying that something I liked that she said was that competencies are going to come more into play. So people having transferable skills from maybe industries not even really related to construction, I think we're going to totally come into play. So I think all of these things are kind of converging on more standards and more streamlining.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the competency piece is really intriguing as well too, as we look at the obvious skilled labor shortage that's been talked about over and over and over again. The competency of going into other industries of, they may not have construction experience, but they have these competencies that are directly correlating and beneficial to the construction industry, and pulling those people in and trying to recruit them over into the industry. It's a fascinating avenue to channel. And I think it makes a ton of logical sense to go in and try to find the people with the needed soft skills, with the needed project management skills, and convince them to come over to construction. That necessitates the industry going on that PR campaign as well too, and trying to change the perception and the image of the industry. And we talked with Aaron Volk just recently as well too, of the industry needs kind of our own U.S. Army ad campaign of be an army of one, and make construction cool, and really come together as an industry and be aggressive and go out and proactively pull in the next generation, and figure out how to talk to them and meet them where they are and what's going to resonate with them, not necessarily what's resonating with us that's in the industry already. Because if that message worked, those people would already be in the industry. The message of what's resonating with people in the industry is not working with those outside. So we have to change our tactics and change our messaging. But we have to present a united front in that.
Yeah, and I think tactics have totally changed. I think there's no doubt still the huge issue of the labor shortage, but I feel like we've heard those words used less and less, and I think the problem is being just reframed. And I think organizations are just taking the responsibility for reframing it as we have a hiring problem. We need to figure out what is going to attract the next generation, but also attract people with the right skills. So I think that's another key point that's kind of next for the industry, is that problem is being reframed to, okay, there won't be just a magic influx of skilled labor or magic influx of people that understand these new tools. We need to reframe how we're recruiting them.
Yeah. Yeah. I hadn't thought about that before, but I think you're totally right. That phrase, the skilled labor shortage, has come up less and less, and it's been more about hiring and retaining and how do you attract the next generation, which all rolls into the skilled labor shortage. But
Yeah,
it's a reframing of the issue. I agree. That's cool. Where do you see the future of Bridging the Gap for the next 200 episodes as we move from year 4 to year 8? Where do you see it going?
I see the reach kind of going even deeper on some of the topics. I think there is a lot of power in kind of looking, really putting a lens to some of the major parts of the industry. Just like the series on advancing prefab, I think so much came out of that short amount of time that I don't know. I think there will be more current events type of topics. Like there are the major trends that we're always going to cover, but I think there are new things that are coming onto the scene all the time that I think uh, people really want to talk about, like right as they happen.
Mm.
So I see there being more reach there, but and just more reach into the rest of the world. I think there will be probably we'll be able to reach people in new languages, and I think there's a ton of potential to keep covering those trends. But I also think the show, I think, will keep uh, making great resources on here's what we've learned from this whole time, and I think we can help put all of that information kind of into action. I think we'll have even stronger calls to action on things like hiring and productization and everything like that. I think we'll probably start challenging people even more to break the mold and do something different.
I like it. I like it. Yeah, I'm really excited about and looking forward to diving more into the stories and exploring the similarities and the differences between how construction is done in various parts of the world, how we can learn from each other. The same, as we talked about the convergence of manufacturing to construction and what can those industries learn from each other. I think the same applies in different parts of the world. They have different approaches to construction, different mandates, obviously, and how they have to legally and the requirements to do construction. But we can still learn from Canada, can learn from the U.S. The U.S. can learn from Canada, UK, Australia. And we've had guests from all those different places. But I think being able to just go deeper in that of what are you doing well that we can do in this part of the world, and and vice versa. Where are the stumbling blocks that we've been having, but another part of the world may have already figured out, and we can just kind of pick up speed and kind of crowdsource good information.
Yeah, I love that.
So, final question for you, Eric. If I could give you all power and you could snap your fingers and innovate one part of the industry, what would you pick to innovate?
Well, I had a thought on the innovation question. I should have known that this question was coming. I thought you were going to ask, what does innovation mean to me?
I was thinking about it, but you've answered it a couple of times. But you could give another version of it if you have a new take on what does innovation mean to you.
I think it probably be similar to what it was last time. I think it's a mindset, and I think it is constantly figuring out how to make things work and then making them work better. That can be my soapbox that I'll stay on. If I had all construction power, I could innovate one thing. The agreement on like a really attractive library of just standards and templates. I think if there is kind of universal agreement and adoption of those, I think there's so much less waste. I think there so much gets taken off your plate that you can focus on other things. So somehow getting agreement or buy-in there. Maybe it's a big kind of open source type of thing where people are kind of sharing the best versions of those standards and templates. Yeah. I think being able to take some of the mundaneness or mundanity, however you say that word, off the table and giving you some, I think it's giving you the most valuable resource back, which is time.
I like it. That's a good one. So for the record, I never get to answer this question. I get to ask it all the time. I'm cheating because I'm going to say two things, but it's historically my question. So I'm going to take that that liberty. So on the technical side, I would snap my fingers and interoperability would just be a thing. No matter what software you used, you could pull data in easily, seamlessly connect it, and it would just work. You would just say, I want to connect software A to software B, and boom, it goes. You can pull all the data that you need magically. On the human side of things is my second vantage point, and that would be just to snap my fingers and people would just own their story, embrace their story, and then share it. No matter if they think it's compelling or not, just talk about it. Share your story. Go out, and it doesn't have to be something grand and elaborate. Just talk about what's happening on the job site and what's going on in the industry. That's the only way that we're going to be able to kind of pull back the mystery that is construction to those outside of the industry, is if we talk about it and we share our story. Well, Eric, thanks so much for joining me on this side of the microphone this time, and for all the huge major work and heart and blood, sweat, and tears that you've invested in bridging the gap over the last 200 episodes. Looking forward to the next 200.
Well, thanks, Todd. I'm looking forward to it, and I totally agree. It's my favorite investment here. I'm invested in the show, and I can't wait to see what the next 200 bring.